Well, of course, old electronic and electric equipment can be pretty bad for the environment, and particularly for the environment in developing countries, if it's not dealt with in the right sort of way. And that's why we have these very strict directives in place. You either clutter up landfill, using up valuable land, creating carbon and methane emissions in the process, or you end up with pretty toxic materials being dumped in places, particularly in some developing countries, in heaps outside towns, with kids roaming over them, causing all sorts of potential health hazards in the process. Used in the wrong way, waste electronic and electrical equipment can be very dangerous. It can be dangerous to the environment, it can be dangerous to human health. Used in the right way and reused and redeployed and made use of in the proper way, like RDC themselves do, then it can be a very valuable resource. And it's turning it from being an unhealthy bit of waste to being a healthy bit of productive, usable material. That's the key to dealing with it properly. There are already, of course, pretty strict penalties, especially if you export waste electronic and electrical equipment. And the Environment Agency will regularly take action both to intercept materials that are wrongly being exported and will, where necessary, bring prosecutions, and in some cases will make sure that the courts impose fines. In some cases, people go to prison. So there's a pretty tough regime in place. Whether it's tough enough is an interesting question. I think probably rather than intensifying the penalties, what we need to do is redouble our efforts to track the materials down. And we're increasingly using very good intelligence information that's providing us with extremely good leads, and has in fact led to quite a number of very successful prosecutions. I think the quantity of electronic and electrical waste will increase, because as more countries use and buy and dispose of more such equipment, as standards of living rise, as economic progress takes place, well, we hope it takes place in years to come, as all of that happens, the quantity of electronic equipment will undoubtedly increase. That means we need to get better at dealing with it when it comes towards the end of its initial life. And so I think the extent of the problem will increase. I hope that what will happen is that RDC and other companies like it will be able to increase their activity, drawing the valuable materials back out of the products when they've come to the end of their initial life, and enabling those products to be reused, because that has to be the answer. You've got more of this equipment, let's have more of the reusing of it at the end of its initial life. Well, we're already deploying now teams of investigators and inspectors at ports and also further upstream in the places where the waste is coming from in the first instance. We're also acting on intelligence. We're working very closely with Interpol. There's a lot of cooperation across the international spectrum on this. We're getting much better at doing it. But of course, what happens is that a lot of people trying to export some of this stuff illegally will put the illegal material at the back of a container, and will put some legal material at the front of a container, so when the container is opened for a random inspection, actually all you can see is legal material. So we need to get more astute at identifying what lies behind the front of the container. And we're doing that, and we're taking action where necessary. Well, RDC have done a very professional job for us in the Environment Agency, and we know that we can rely on RDC if we put a piece of waste electronic or electrical equipment that's come to the end of its life for us. If we put it to RDC, then we know that RDC are going to use every single bit of that equipment for further use. Nothing will go to landfill. And it's the guarantee that RDC are able to give us. It's the level of professional service over a whole number of years. It's the standard that we have come absolutely to expect from RDC, that we have no hesitation whatsoever in continuing to use you. If your standards began to slip, then of course we'd reserve the right to walk away and use someone else. But your standards have been pretty high, and that's what we like to see. When I came down to see the RDC depot at Witham in Essex, the thing that really impressed me was the care with which every single bit of each piece of equipment that comes into you is thought about, is looked at, is found a use for, and it was that thoroughness of approach. Nothing was seen as disposable, and it was that quality, I think, that really shone out for me in the way in which RDC approached this. And you've shown it can be done. Not only that, but you've shown that it's economically advantageous not just for RDC as a company, but for us as the Environment Agency, because for every piece of equipment that we send to you, you not only take care of it in a sensible and sustainable way, but what's more, you pay us for it. And that return of money to the Environment Agency, it makes it a win-win for us. I think it will be mainly in terms of the intensity of enforcement that things will change, rather than the basic legislation. I think the basic legislation, especially the WEEE Directive itself, is in pretty good shape. Where I think there may be some progress to be made is on the idea of individual producer responsibility. That the companies that make this equipment in the first place taking more of a responsibility further down the chain of its life. Now, it's very difficult actually to put into legal form, let alone practical implication. But that's the area where I think we ought to be looking at. And working with companies like Dell and Hewlett-Packard and so on to look at what can be done to build in greater responsibility right from the outset from the company that makes and sells the product in its first incarnation. Well, I very much hope that other areas of government will follow suit. It doesn't all, of course, have to come to RDC, however much that might be good for you, but to be dealt with in the same sort of way, knowing that nothing's ending up in landfill, that everything that possibly can be is being reused. Having that knowledge across the whole of the public sector would be just terrific. As I think the public sector generally has been making progress on this in recent years, but still a long way to go. And the example of RDC working with the Environment Agency in the way that we've been able to do over the course of the last 12 years, I hope can be something of an example for others to pick up and use.